We share. Oh, take a ride with me.
My name is Chibuzor Onyema. Chibuzor meaning God first, and Ephraim, as you can see in the Bible in Genesis book, where Joseph had two sons and named one Manasseh and the second Ephraim because he had been fruitful in the land of his fugitive, as it were. That's the meanings of my name. So you find God first, and then you find fruitfulness in my name. Onyema is the family name. That's my last name. I was born to the family of Elder Michael Onyekwuremogugu and Deaconess Mercy Eziwanye Wogugu in a village called Omunkwo Ikembosi in Isialangwa, South Local Government Area. But my parents at the time of my birth were not living in my village. They were civil servants and were living. My father was at that time a bursar in a high school at a place called Mbausi, also in Isialangwa, in the then old Imo State, Nigeria. At my birth, I became the seventh surviving children of my family. You can see it's a large family that my parents already had. They were expecting a female child, as my parents told me, but when I was born, they found that I was a male child. So they liked it because, you know how they value male children. But my parents already had 3 other males before my birth, and so I joined to make it 4 males that they had. We had 3 sisters, bigger than all of us boys, having lost our oldest brother during the war. Immediately after the Nigerian Civil War, just about when people were returning to their homes. In 1970, my parents lost their only son at that time. But they would go on to have 3 other sons before myself in 1978. Seeing that I was the last child of that large family of 7, with my oldest sister being so much older than myself, having been born in 1964 herself, and the second daughter also being born in 1965, and the one following them in 1969, you can see the gap between me and the sisters that we had. So they showered me with a lot of love. I grew up as a very pampered boy. I got whatever I wanted. Staple food in Eastern Nigeria at the time, as it were also in Africa as a whole, was the fufu or gari or regular cassava produce. But I didn't taste any of such until I grew up to going to secondary school. Reason was that I chose what I wanted to eat, and whatever I said I wanted was given to me by my parents. So I enjoyed a lot of love and pampering, and I enjoyed a lot of care. However, as I grew up, I found that my loving parents did not have all the resources that were required to providing everything that you would call basic. And so, whereas some people who lived and observed us from outside thought that we had it all, we were seeing ourselves as a little below the middle class, average middle class. And there was so much also to be desired than what we were having. And so I grew up having the desire to change the narrative of my family. I would always say that there's so much poverty around here, and my peers would not see the poverty that I was seeing. There were things I desired to have as a child that I couldn't, toys that I wanted to play with that I couldn't have. For instance, I didn't go to any nursery school. I didn't go to preschool. I started primary school from when I was 5 years old, and that was in a community primary school. Eventually, when I grew up to go into secondary, I couldn't also go to the model colleges that I would have wished to go, where my peers and some friends were attending, because partly because my parents couldn't afford it, or because it was too far from home, and my father didn't have a car at the time. And being a little child, who would take you to school and bring you back, all of those inconveniences. So I went to schools that were within the neighborhood, that were easily accessible. And so my primary education started in my village, because at some point in my parents' life, my father was transferred to a place close to our village, and he decided to relocate all his children to the village. I was there for a number of years, and during the time was when I started my primary school. So my primary school started at Chibuzor Community Primary, you can see. And I've often cracked jokes with my friends when I speak English today that I was taught English with Igbo language. Because in the school, teachers would like to use basic local language to communicate to you in a way that you will understand the English that they will eventually teach you. Whereas English was the language of tutelage, but we all were taught in a language that we would understand. So I started my primary school in Amos Okwalam Community Primary, would eventually now I later changed to Mbato Community Primary. But at some point in 1987, my father was transferred back to the city of Owerri, which was the state capital, a little further from where we lived in the village. And so he decided to move us back again to the city. So I would now change my school from Mbato Community Primary to Ubomiri Community Primary School in Mbitoli local government of Imo State. Would now go on again to secondary school in Ubomiri Community Secondary School. So you can find community reoccurring in my growing up. And that tells you that the narrative is not that of a city boy who had everything that he needed, but somehow God has been by my side and has been holding me up as I grew up. And so we finished, as I was finishing we call it JSS in Nigeria here, the Junior Secondary 1 in 1989. By 1989, 1990, we were the first set to begin the new 6-year program, the junior secondary and the senior secondary, when it was introduced in Nigeria. And so by 1991, precisely in August, Abia State was created, another state out from Imo State, Nigeria. Abia State was created, and my father, being a civil servant, would be one of the first batches to be sent to Umuahia, the new state capital of Abia. And so I transferred back again to Umuahia and then got registered in Evangel High School, Old Umuahia, in Umuahia, where I did part of my JSS 2 and JSS 3, writing my junior WAEC, but would eventually now get transferred to a school that I really desired to go to, which was Ibeko High School, to start my senior secondary one in 1993. And that's the trajectory of my early educational year. When I was finishing secondary school in 1995, I didn't have motivation to go to the university, in spite of the fact that my older siblings had all gone to university, and my father was looking forward to me making the best grades in my senior secondary education to qualify me to go into the university. I didn't take that examination seriously because I had determined in my heart that if I failed that senior secondary education, that I wasn't going to be sent to any university, I would be sent to learn a trade. And so I told my parents, when I could only make 2 credits in the senior secondary education and had passes in all others, I came home with the result, looking straight into my father's eyes and not feeling bad about it. I said, what kind of poor result is this? And where would you get this kind of antecedent from? None of us in this family face exams. Where did you pick this kind of character from that you won't take your exam seriously? And I thought you were reading. You're an intelligent chap. What happened to you? I looked him in the face and I said, Papa, the much education we have in this family hasn't been able to provide us with the food and the kind of livelihood that we need. I want to go learn how to trade in motor parts, and so I can come and liberate this family and bring money, because business would give us the immediate quick fix to our economic situation. My father said, who is complaining? Have I asked you to pay rent? You're barely 15. I was just 15 and a half going to 16. And why are you worried about who pays what bills? Am I complaining? Did I tell you? And then I go on with that argument, and then I'll eventually corner my mother, tell her how I wanted to go into business than go to the university. My father was so disgruntled with me. He was disappointed. He tried to convince me, my older siblings tried, but none of them succeeded. My father was retiring the same year, and so once he retired, he set up a business center in Aba and made me the manager. Remember, I was just 15 and a half. I needed tutelage, I needed guidance, I needed someone to put me through that learning, because you know the Igbo trade formula is apprenticeship. I was supposed to be apprenticed to a master who will teach me the nitty-gritty of business life and tell me how to do, what to do and what not to do, so that I can be set on a good pedestal. But I didn't have, my father he himself was not a business person, so he uses all his life savings, opens a business center, sells me to about to manage the business as the manager. So he hired the staff. I would be the one supervising people. I didn't have experience. I had just left high school. And so that business would crash eventually to my lack of knowledge, to my lack of experience, and to the several business attacks and competitions, and of course the inexperience showed in a lot of what you could see. So that business would collapse in 1997, and my oldest brother, whom at that time had started working in Port Harcourt, insisted that I should move over with him to Port Harcourt. I warned that I wasn't going to go to university immediately. He cajoled me, tricked me to Port Harcourt, and then convinced me to register in the JAM extramural classes. I would write WAEC eventually again, and then make my papers, write JAM in 1998, passing now to go study law in the University of Calabar, because that again was what I loved. I had watched a lot of successful Nigerian lawyers because activism has been in my blood since childhood, and I felt if I grow up, I was going to stand up to the things that I wasn't comfortable about in the country Nigeria where we live, and that the only way to do it was to know my rights and be able to broker the legal knowledge. And so if I would go to the university for any reason whatsoever, it would be to study law. I warned my eldest brother had been my greatest party man. He supported me and said, I was going to train you in school and you'll be a lawyer, you'll be successful. But at least you would have the education. So if you now decide to go into business, it will be fine for everyone, both you and us. Because we're not going to have a brother who didn't go to school, whereas all of us have gone. And so he convinced me. And then I would eventually go on to study law in the University of Calabar from 1999 section 2000 section in University of Calabar. Somewhere in my second year in the law program, there was a long, protracted strike action. There was agitation between the lecturers, and they needed things that the government wasn't doing, and so they decided to strike. And during that strike that lasted several months, a friend of mine, Joseph Alozie, now Joseph Newman, who was doing a part-time job, I didn't understand exactly what he was doing, and so I told him how bored I was, staying just and eating in my older brother's house in Port Harcourt, and asked what it was he was doing that was giving him money. And he said, oh, you can join us. It was Home Health Education Service, a program of the Seventh-day Adventist Church where young people would sell books and make money from it. And so I asked what I needed to do. He told me. I went to Aba, inquired. At the time, Aba City, Eastern Nigeria, was where the church headquarters was for Eastern Nigeria, and I was in Port Harcourt. So I moved from Port Harcourt to Aba to inquire. And then got set up, a little training in a day. And then I got equipped with the books. I saw the books were so beautiful, colorful. And as soon as I picked the books, I said to myself, I'm not just going to sell these books like a salesman, I'm going to sell it like someone who has knowledge. By this time, I was a second-year law program, and so a law student. I decided to read the books first. And so I stayed a day in Aba reading the ones that fascinated me the most. And then, as I got in the public transport going back to Port Harcourt, I brought out one and was reading because I wanted to read more before I would start canvassing the books in Port Harcourt from the Monday after the Thursday that I had left. And the lady who sat beside me saw the book and said, what's this book about? I had read the book to pass the middle stage, and I started to tell her about the book. And I saw that I was already beginning to exhibit knowledge from the book. I listened to myself as I told the lady about the book. She said, I want to buy. And she said, is there any other one? I said, oh yeah, one like it. And in fact, I told her there was a whole series. The book I was reading was The Complete Twin, because we had the complete twin, the complete courtship, the complete marriage. We had the smart love, then we had highly effective marriage. All of those comes within the marriage. So I sold it as bouquet. I told her, in fact, it comes in a bouquet of 5. I would advise that you buy the entire bouquet. Remember, I had only just finished reading The Complete Twin and I had started reading The Complete Courtship. But the way that I talked about The Complete Twin that I had and that I had read and The Complete Courtship, the lady became interested, and she would end up buying all the books that I was taking to sell in Port Harcourt the following week. I made a U-turn to her buyer using the money that I had made to buy. They were surprised. No new canvasser of the books had ever returned the same day of purchase to buy new ones without having excuses of why he couldn't sell. And then the director of the program told me that I was bound to do very well. That will go to become the foundation of what eventually evolved into what announced me globally as the best salesperson for home health education service for the entire West Central Africa in 2009, because I continued and didn't stop even after the strike action until 2004, when I left Eastern Nigeria for Western Nigeria in Ibadan, precisely where I stayed, and then made the canvassing of the books my mainstay, working for the Home Health Education in the United States, and then developing myself in the materials, attending seminars, reading voraciously the books, and preparing myself as though I were a consultant than just a product salesperson. Now, dealing more on the value of the products that people bought instead of the products themselves. I would now give seminars in banks, in churches, in big organizations. I would fly from one city to the other, holding symposia, seminars, getting people reversed from lifestyle diseases, and then I became the best salesperson in the Home Health Education Nigeria, and that would also now translate to becoming the best in the entire West and Central Africa in 2009, where for 5 years continued, ending 2009. So that is my entry into entrepreneurship. I made sure that I read the books, I made sure that I equipped myself. I built a website, I developed a business card. I saw that I brought certain innovations into what I did, and people would subscribe to my, those who would be selling books, selling, in quote. Now found that I was doing it differently, and then the leadership of the program in Nigeria started asking me to share my experiences. So I began to train other salespersons. I began to develop more interest in entrepreneurship. Having failed before in 1996, 1996, when I managed my father's business, I was determined never again to fail if I made an inroad into entrepreneurship. So I started building the blocks that I needed to succeed, saving up money to develop other skills and businesses. And in 2006, I would apply to come to Babcock University because I had a persuasion to also be a preacher. I applied to come to Babcock University to train as a theology major student so that I can qualify to be a pastor in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But at the time, I had a client base that was deafening and people who were dependent on my services or on the product. And so when I came to school the first week, the phone calls that I received from my clients could not allow me to concentrate. I decided that I wasn't ready to come to study theology. So I returned in 2007 to begin the program. And in 2007, when I started the program, I then also found that I had some lapses in the interest that I had. There were things I needed to do. So I did the program for 1 year, deferred the admission because at that time, in 2008 it was, I received an invitation from Review and Herald United States, which were partnering with Home Health Education Service, asking me to come for a 1 year program, what they call Light American Mission. Myself and a few other Africans who had distinguished themselves in superordinary, what I call superordinary sales instinct to the United States. They wanted us to share for 1 year how we were doing it differently. So I deferred the program at Babcock because of that Light American Mission program. I will return again in 2009 to continue the program, but we'll defer for another time to go to aviation school because at this time I had developed interest in tourism and then I needed license. And for me to get a license, I needed certification in aviation and tours to be able to get the required IATA International Air Transport Association license and then be accredited to operate in Nigeria. So I went to aviation school for 2 years, returning again to complete the program. So I had a checkered Bachelor of Arts in Religious Studies, which naturally should have ended in 4 years, but it ended in 8 years because I had to stop, set up a tourism business, come back, go to aviation school, return. I got married also in the middle of the program to my wife, Ihoma, who has been a blessing, with whom I have 4 wonderful children, 2 boys and 2 girls. And so I would go into different businesses that had now opened from my many travel experiences, from my interaction with the world, globally and locally. I could see problems that needed to be solved. And being someone who was activist by nature, I wanted to respond to situations But at some point, you discover that you can't solve every problem. So you choose which ones you wanted to solve. So now that I saw health was a challenge, my wife and I agreed. She is a food microbiologist, a scientist, food microbiologist whose interest in food formulation. And I started playing with food, reversing people's otherwise terminal sicknesses with food. And so I had started running what was called a mobile clinic in Ibadan at the time. And so we registered the company that we called Life Elastic Limited. And it was so people can know that life expectancy was just a thing of the mind and that you can live as long as you wish, only if you knew what to do differently from other people. So Life Elastic was me, my wife spearheading and superintending over, whereas I started Elastic Tours. My first tourism business was travel-wise. I would eventually sell it off to somebody who was interested in the franchise in Port Harcourt, and then set up Elastic Tours because tourism proper was my thing and not just the sale of tickets alone. And then we would go on to set up a few other companies around it. But today, after 12 years, we can look back and say that the Lord has been good because what started as just Life Elastic Limited now is the Elastic group of companies. And there are 6 other companies that have grown from under it. During the time that I set up in Ibadan to do the home health education service, thoughts came as to how I can do it differently. And I found that people were so dependent on chemical drugs, and that wasn't helping much. There had been new diseases. Cancer was just beginning to come into our attack at the time. Our society was beginning to experience these very strange deaths and sicknesses. And we began to ask questions as to why. And then I read in one of my books, people commit suicide with the use of knives and forks. And then I said, how true? This is very correct. And then I began to do what I call natural reversal therapies. Someone had me one time making a presentation at the immigration's office in Ibadan and went to tell a man about me who would now pay 10 months for me to be on the radio. Because the man felt that what I was sharing with the immigration officers needed to also be shared with larger society. And he paid for me to be on the radio, Pastor Abraham Judah Daniel of blessed memory. And so I was in Premier FM 93.5, having Adedamola Tinubu as my presenter. And at the time, we talked about natural reversal therapies. We talked about how to use natural measures, lifestyle, to reverse diseases and control debilitating health challenges. People began to respond. The reaction we got from people was enormous. We saw that my phones will not rest. Even in the midnight, messages would. And Damola Tinubu told me, we've run programs, but this one is attracting so much traffic. Are we able to do this twice a day? The Broadcasting Corporation of Oyo State will call me on TV to do what they called health half hour. And when I eventually got married, it became easier. My wife understood sciences better than I, and so she would explain the way the body reacts to food and all of that. And then we had what I would call a ministry together. It was beautiful. And from there, because I was on the radio most of the time, I began to become a regular participant in different radio programs, interviews, and all what have you. And I now started receiving invitations from around the country to speak in events and to, hold programs, be guest speaker, be keynote speaker, and all what have you. A certain government would call me. They wanted me at the time to come do what they call grassroots health awareness campaign. They said they had a budget of a certain amount, but that they would make do with a certain amount. But because at the time, most of my interventions were purely missionary, I would charge money only so I can keep body and soul together, but not service fee outright as it was supposed to be. Even when results were found most of the time, I was not charging as per charging, fees that were commensurate with the services I was rendering. I looked at that offer and I told them that my principle as a child and what I had been told growing up, my father taught us contentment. And that if what I'm doing is able to put food on my table, I wasn't going to do this, take certain amount and then allow them raise a voucher and then retire, give them invoice that they will use to retire a huge and bigger chunk. I told them I wasn't going to do that. And I took a walk away. They thought I'd come back, but I never did. At the time, I was single and was only planning to get married, but I was already courting my fiancée, who today is my beautiful wife. I told her that this temptation had come, and you know how much we need money around this time. Something significant happened just before I went to that meeting. The only car that I had that time locked engine, and so I needed to replace the engine after. So in fact, I needed money the very day that they were making the proposition to me. But I looked at how much the cost of the engine. It was 28,000 Nigerian naira at the time. And they were going to pay me upward of 4 million if I accepted, even though I will retire a lot more than 20 million to them. But I just said, no, you know what? The problem that I have is small to the conscience that I have to deal with growing up, because I was just 29 years. And if my father was happy in his retirement, doesn't have anything to his conscience, I felt that I needed also to live an upright life and move steadily with God. I mean, my name is Chibuzor. What can be better weapon for you to know you must succeed? And if you're fruitful in your name, Ephraim, then you don't have nothing to fear. And so I determined that I was going to walk away, and I walked away. They watched me do, and they thought that I would return, but I never did. It wasn't long, I was invited to also be a keynote speaker in another place, where the subject of my discussion was slavish mentality, eating what is yours to keep. And I was talking about corruption, relating it with premarital sexuality, and with all vices that was bedeviling the society, and everything that I identified as the bane of society. Somebody was there listening, who had met me walk away in the other place where I was offered this other bounty, as you would call it. It was not long. Certain government agency had a challenge. They were looking for someone that can facilitate a program, but they didn't know who to call. And then this man recommended me. He said, there's a forthright man that I know. He's not greedy, whatever we pay he will take, and he's able to deliver. And then I was invited. That was the beginning of what marked my success in entrepreneurial life, because this happened in December 2009. December 2008. I was already planning to get married in March 2009 to my fiancée, who had encouraged me to walk away in October from that proposition. And by December 31, when everybody had shut down and traveled to their villages, I got this proposition that I now took on, and eventually I was paid very good amount of money. In today's money, it should be over, in today's Nigerian money, it should be over $20,000 that I was paid. And if you didn't have that kind of money and you're paid $20,000, you know how much you can achieve with it. That's how I got my first seed funding to beginning my entrepreneurial journey. And that has continued to yield until today. Not stopping with all kinds of challenges. And because this is entrepreneurship and my experiences, one of what I found to be my greatest undoing was that I didn't understudy an entrepreneur. I didn't have a mentor who was an entrepreneur. I didn't get apprenticed, So when recently I heard that Harvard was beginning to adopt the apprenticeship model of Eastern Nigerian Africa as a successful model in business orientation and strategy implementation, I said, indeed, they know what they're doing. Because when someone sets out to become an entrepreneur, especially in an area that you do not know, you would need a guide, you would need a tutor, you would need a mentor. One who will say, I tried this, it didn't work, don't go that route. Do it this way, don't go. So I learned it all on myself. I made all the mistakes. I lost so much money and time. In fact, I lost time more than money. And in business, you will find that time is more valuable than money. I lost so much time, and eventually I would lose capital. Just recently in 2016, I lost everything that I had. Everything. And became indebted to both the bank and to individuals. I would even have lawsuits as a result. So I found that not being apprenticed and tutored at the earliest stage of my entrepreneurial journey, I still pay heavy debt for it till today. And that's why I make strong recommendation to any young person who wants to be an entrepreneur to understudy someone. Except that as I grew older and began to do different programs and certifications and learning from everything that I could, including life itself from the street, I now have gathered a lot of experience and knowledge, yet I still miss the earlier formative tutelage that I should have got from a successful entrepreneur. At some point, I had to even approach people and ask if they could mentor me, just so I can get to where I'm going. So there's no end to learning, and even I'm open to being apprenticed to someone for the next phase of my entrepreneurial operations. But 3 key things that I have observed is that an entrepreneur must not be speculative. Speculative in the sense that you are presumptuous to think that your product will be accepted once you introduce it to the market. And so you can't also assume that you yourself will be accepted and that the brand will be accepted. And then you don't procrastinate. Once you have that instinct, that intuition that says launch, that's the best time to launch. So I call it PAP, it is PAP. And you know that Nigeria has a food that we call PAP that we use to start children who is a winning food item. When you want a child to go off breast milk, you begin the PAP meal. So PAP, P-A-P, would be presumption, assumption, and procrastination. These are the 3 things that I've observed in entrepreneurship, and I have published it, I have said things about it, I have warned young people, I have educated, I have used it in places, and I have taught young entrepreneurs, do not PAP, don't drink PAP, don't procrastinate, don't assume, don't presume. These things kill business ideas, and they also eventually will deter the entrepreneur from growing as fast as he ought to or should. When I got to a certain stage in my life, I began to ask questions as to why is Africa where it is? How come that we are not making progress? Is there anything wrong with the African mindset? And as I travel across the continents of the world, I see people who are different in colors but are not more intelligent than we are. But I see that they are not as religious as we are in Africa. They don't spend all their time in the church. They spend more time thinking about problems, solving those problems, staying on the solutions, pursuing the solutions, following formulas and principles, and insisting and ensuring that they will get it right. Each time that I saw that when I travel overseas and return back home, I feel that religion has done more harm to the African mindset than it has helped us in growing. And so I felt that I was going to be a very spiritual person, but not religious. Religious in the sense that I am not going to pray on situations that have natural, physical, human abilities for solutions. I would rather commit my intelligentsia to thinking through the problem and finding solution. And then I felt that we needed to create things that can help to re-engineer, reorientate the African mindset. And so I started what I called, in the US, I started what I called Eco Care. And it was Eco Center for African Renaissance, because I looked forward to seeing a new Africa. And I felt Africa should wake up. We can help to shake this continent. By the way, Africa has the largest resource of mineral deposit, the largest human capital, the largest, is the cradle of human development. The first university was found in Africa. God made the world beginning from Africa. Where is the Middle East? When you read the Bible, you will find that Garden of Eden was just at the bank of what today is Cyprus. And so you ask yourself, if this is the cradle of human civilization, how come that we are so backward? And so Eco Center for African Renaissance was to reorientate the African mindset. But when I pushed that a bit and then started seeing more serious challenges, especially in the United States, of blacks whose grandparents were taken into the continent by force as slaves, and seeing that each time they struggle, even with all their education, wanting to equate themselves with the white Aboriginal Americans, it now occurred to me that these people are not yet free from their minds. And so I started to also now think another solution to that problem, which I saw. And what readily came to my mind was to start a project that today is known as Black Ancestral Native Communities Bank. And what Bank is set to achieve is to create a platform for every African who live in diaspora to think, who desires to return home and have a homestead, have kinsmen, belong to community, have family, have a network of people who will accept him for who he is, to begin to do that across Africa, whether it's to Rwanda, whether it's to Ghana, to Nigeria, Namibia, South Africa, wherever in Africa. Because if you're black on the continent, anywhere you live, you first was African. That's what it means, because Africa is the continent of black people. So whether you live in Swaziland, or you live in Switzerland, or you live in Australia, or you are in Brazil, or you are wherever it is, and you are black, you are African, beginning to come home to Africa will give you that number one, identity and freedom of the mind to identify with your people, associate with them, and feel accepted, live free, and nobody would, like George Floyd, kill you for nothing. That's what Bank sought and is seeking to achieve. And it's a program that is unfolding. And just recently, when the COVID-19 struck, and we couldn't travel overseas anymore, we were all here for a whole year plus. Nobody went nowhere. Even if you gave somebody a visa for nothing, he wouldn't travel because everybody was afraid. I began again to see that we as tourists, Nigerian tourists, haven't done much for our country, Nigeria. I began now to articulate what can help save the situation of tourism in Nigeria. We are blessed as a nation. I now developed what I call Elastic Nigeria Tourism Enterprise Resource, ENTER. ENTER seeks to harness all tourism sites and bring them into projects and programs that you can just click and identify which tourism product that is good for me, which location is suitable for me. And then I began to aggregate. It's an ongoing program, and we are doing it now. Hopefully by 2021, we can launch, 2022, sorry, we can launch fully. We are getting feedbacks from people who want to plug into the ENTER project. It's a big project. It's a huge project. It's something that will put Nigeria, when it is completed, on the world map, showing how vast we are and how blessed as a people we are. We don't need any Disney anywhere in the world if we knew what is here in Nigeria. However, we must fix the challenges currently bedeviling the country, which is insecurity, so that people can go to those places and not be afraid of being kidnapped or being killed. But ENTER hopes, and it's my hope, that when ENTER is bettered, and it will be soon, it will solve many problems, including unemployment, including social integration, including education of the ordinary Nigerian child, and full-time engagement of their minds to something more resourceful, more meaningful, and more productive. That's what I'm looking forward to achieve. And for me, that will be my best contribution to society, and to also leave the mark that we've been here, not to escort others who came, but to also make an impact and a value. Recently, when people come to ask questions, as I receive visitors daily who would come to say, tell us your story. In fact, just 3 days ago, I received a phone call from Ghana. It was a publisher of a magazine asking that she wanted to feature me as a vibrant, upcoming African entrepreneur who is making a mark. I was surprised because I'm just here in my little corner. I didn't know that somebody as far as Ghana has observed and noticed what I was doing. And she said, it's our maiden edition this time. We are featuring a woman, and she gives me the woman's background. The next will come in December and will publish in January. You will be the one that will be the writer story. And that motivated me. Questions as to what are the greatest things that you've achieved? What are your motivations, and what are it? I would say, listen, this country is so full of people who don't tell the truth, people who lie, people who deceive, people who cheat. Those people have somehow deformed the integrity and the projection, the image of the nation, to the extent where if you say you are in Nigeria, you're first looked at as a scammer than as a real person. But there are millions of unsung heroes of this country who are not doing anything wrong but are making genuine, legitimate monies, are in businesses, are solving problems, and they are making a living. Hard work pays ultimately. There is nothing called free money. For those who are doing Yahoo, I have a news for you. We don't do Yahoo, we do Wehoo. Wehoo is solve problem for people. They will contribute pennies, pens, and small coins for you. Monies that are cluster funding are usually the best in enriching. That's how come the man Babi Jebu is as rich as he is in Nigeria today. It is Wehoo. It is people coming and by their own self contributing based on an idea, an innovation, an invention, a problem that has been solved. When someone develops solution to problem, people will contribute to his success and they will even sing praises. But if someone is sitting in his bedroom scamming, deceiving, and stealing money, trying to hack into people's accounts and things, in the end, he's going to be caught up. He will end up in jail. It's never going to end well. Every act of deceit, of treachery, of stealing has an immediate repercussionary measure, and the law catches up with the person, and then the person goes into extinct. It doesn't matter how much fame, but end is imminent. But if it is based on hard work, we were talking about the accolades and the certifications and the awards and all what have you. All those came as a result of hard work. For instance, when in 2009, Home Health Education globally gave me award as best sales and innovative entrepreneurial salesperson in West and Central Africa division in Ghana at an event in Ghana. I didn't know it was coming. I didn't know that I was doing my bit in my little corner and I was doing the best that I could. When I got that award, several other awards, Editorial Savelis, Spain, the Stamboro Press, England, and the West Central Africa division giving me award as best student literature evangelist of that year, and several other awards. And just recently, in this year 2021, in February, my phone rang and it was a call inviting me to become a member of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group. I would eventually receive a letter of offer inviting me into that very prestigious membership of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group to serve in the tourism hospitality industries thematic group. Those are the kinds of recognitions that come with hard work. Those are things that can create lasting legacies for children that you're bringing into the world. The name that was not ab initio known anywhere can now begin to resonate when it is mentioned. The village where you come from that nobody cared to know about will begin to receive recognition because there is someone who has solved problems that passed through that village, that lived through that time. People don't know that lasting legacy and relationship will be the strongest, the best legacy that anybody would want to leave behind. Not how much money, not how many houses, what kind of cars. Those are not things that people would. For instance, it's like if you call people to your wedding event, after 2 years, they're not talking about your wedding anymore. They will be talking about some very recent ones. It will be just your photograph and that of your wife hanging on your wall that will live to tell the story. But the marriage itself is what continues for a lifetime. So instead of wasting monies in planning wedding events and naming ceremonies and throwing big bashes and parties, which is, by the way, the reason why people steal. People want to live a lifestyle that is so flamboyant and higher than their earnings and income. They will not be able to sustain such lifestyle, so they go now dipping into people's pockets because they want to maintain certain lifestyle. How about if you have a solution to a problem and you're seeking investor, you're seeking investment into it? and people look at your pitch, they will see that it's intelligible, and they will buy into your pitch. They will invest into your program or into your project, and they will bring the money. And wealth will come from there. Wealth is procedural. Wealth is not instant. That is the warning that I want to give to every young person coming. You want to be an entrepreneur, you must be patient. It is like the bamboo tree. You plant it, it stays in ground for 6 years. Nobody would know that anything is there, but every morning when you wake up, you must go to pour water on that spot. It is that watering that you keep pouring for 6 years. It will now sprout out something that is very small for the first time after 6 years. And then within the next 6 months, it will grow into a mighty tree. In another decade, you are still harvesting and selling from that one bamboo that took you 6 years to water in ground. An entrepreneur is never appreciated, seen, or felt within the earlier formative years because nobody would know you. There is nothing. Success attracts friends, but when it is being formed, you just find that you're your own. You will suffer some deprivations, you will suffer some loneliness, suffer some ups and some downs, some very highs and some very lows. When those happen, just know that that is the making of a sustainable entrepreneur. When the chips are done, when the life is built and established, when the businesses are created, then you find that people will begin to identify with you. I read something just before coming here. Someone said, take note of that gap you have given me during my time of formation and struggle. Measure that gap. I would need you to triple it in times of my success. So it means if you're not coming near me now because you can't find reason, better walk faster when I succeed. For an entrepreneur, success is certain, it is sure. This is my story. I hope you get inspired. Thank you.